their BMI. So you just have to go on to online on Google and type in BMI calculator. It'll ask for your height and your weight, and then you plug that in, and as long as you're above 18.5, so 18.5 to 19 is the lowest you want to go, all the way up to 24 is considered normal weight. And so as long as you're at 18.5 or above, you're okay. So that's the first question, but the important part. And then the second is, if you are, trying to maintain weight or even stop losing weight, if you feel like you are, depending on what your BMI is again, but you can just eat more things like bread and rice that you brought up, because bread is, much higher in calorie density, 1,200 calories a pound, and rice is only about 500 calories a pound. So it's still pretty low, but higher than, say, vegetables. But the other things you can do to help maintain or gain weight when someone's trying, really exercising heavily or trying to maintain, would be to eat more of the yellow light foods, which we talk about in class a lot. So that would be like avocados and dried fruit and nut butters and nuts and seeds and dried fruit and things like that, because those foods are still healthy, but they're high in calorie density. And so most people are trying to lose weight, but those are foods you can eat more of if you're trying to gain weight or maintain weight. And then the other important part is to maintain or gain muscle by getting weight-bearing exercise, resistance exercise like hand weights and resistance bands and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's right.
The thing that I'm having difficulty with also is I get migraines. And so some nuts don't work for me, and avocados definitely. Also, I'm wondering to go with the bread and rice, especially with the bread, can I add some organic jams with that?
And sure, that would be considered higher in calorie density too than just eating fruit, because it's all mashed together. But as long as it doesn't have, the problem is they tend to add a lot of sugar, unless you made it yourself without extra sugar. It adds a lot of sugar, which is just empty calories with no nutrient value. But so you're better off just eating berries. But again, depending on what your health issues are and what your health goals are, if you're otherwise pretty healthy and you're just trying to, again, either maintain or gain weight, then I would say a little bit of jelly on some bread's probably all right. But again, it depends on if you're on blood pressure medication, diabetes medication, heart disease, all these different things. And otherwise, we would say to avoid the simple sugar. But just kind of depends individually on what's going on in health goals and whatnot.
Thank you.
So when you mentioned that avocados and nuts give you a problem, we went without avocados, nuts, or olives, or for our first 2.5 years, because we were following Dr. Esselstyn's recommendation for reversing heart disease. We lived, and you'd be able to live with that if you listen to Chef AJ. She's a no-nut person, and she's living, so not to worry about that. I'd still incorporate the flax seeds, like a tablespoon of ground flax seeds a day for the omega-3s. Or if you can't do that, consider doing some sea vegetable like dulse or wakame or nori, which would give you some omega-3s. The dulse is a package a month. It's a 1 or 2 ounce, I think a 2 ounce package at Whole Foods. And yeah, so in terms of if you're losing weight, you don't want to lose more weight, you like potatoes, eat a few more. Yeah, eat a few more. You like beans, eat a few more. Just eat more than you're used to eating, because I know you're used to eating smaller portions of what were considered carbohydrates, which were, you've been probably told, push them away, don't eat too much of that. But you're not going to eat too much of that. You're going to be fine as long as you're staying away from the things that lead to insulin resistance. And what leads to insulin resistance? The fats in your diet, the meat, dairy, eggs. and the oils.
And what about olive oil?
Yeah, olive oil leads to insulin resistance if that's an issue that you're dealing with. So it's not a health food.
Right.
So could you eat an olive or several? Yeah. It has the fiber with it and the other plant nutrients, which are healthful for you. But where did the olive oil come from? You squeeze a bunch of olives and you just get the pure fat.
Mhm.
Does that sound healthy?
Yeah, it does. I can't eat, unfortunately, I cannot eat whole olives, because I have kidney disease. And, that's, one of the foods that I need to stay away from.
I don't think I've heard that before, Scott. Have you heard that olives you can't eat?
Not at all. I don't know what does olives have in it that's
Yeah, I've never heard of that either.
worrisome for kidney disease. No, eat
Uh,
whole foods. That'll actually the best thing you can do for kidney disease is to avoid animal protein and to get your protein sources from plants, because that's what's easier on the kidneys.
Absolutely.
So was this your doctor who told you that, or just something that you read, or a friend told you
No.
that?
Something that, I got, on a document that I got from her of foods to avoid.
From where? The document is from where?
We're just kind of questioning because what the source of your information is really important in this world. There's a lot of information that's swirling around, which makes this a very confusing world, because you read one thing and it sounds good and you believe it, but the source may not be a reliable evidence-based source. So when you're sharing a document that doesn't, make sense to those of us who have been studying this for the last 9-10 years, we question what is the source. We would like to be able to see that and review it just like Gregor does. And we've never heard from Gregor that anyone with kidney disease should stay away from olives.
Okay,
Yeah.
Is it the salt in the olives? I'm thinking.
could be, yeah. Yeah,
That's a good point. The only thing I would say about kidney disease is if you're on kidney dialysis, then you need to see a kidney dietitian, and there are specific things. You can't have too much potassium, too much phosphorus. There are a few tweaks that have to be addressed when you're on kidney dialysis, but otherwise, just for regular chronic kidney disease that I see every single day at work, plant-based diets actually improve kidney function in my experience. So, and the studies show that too.
I had a thought.
mhm,
Yeah, Dorothea, the other thing I was thinking about was what I've been doing recently. Instead of jams so much, I've been just making compotes. So taking berries, like frozen berries, and putting them in a pot and cooking it down, and I'll use that compote on something, on a pancake or on a piece of bread or whatever. So that way it doesn't have all the sugars and other processed food. If I really want it sweeter, I'll just put a little bit of chopped dates or something like that. So that works really well. And you can save it. It's not gonna last nearly as long as something like a jam would, but it will last for a few days in the fridge. Yeah.
Before we have Eric continue on, I just wanted to share a story which Velvet started out with at the beginning, reminding me that I had my first experience with the restaurant called Roots. They've been in business for 7 months down in Medford when I was visiting down there to see my granddaughter's ballet. Anyway, Roots, there's another name with it. What's the other name that goes with it, Velvet?
It's actually Rooted, Eat More Plants.
Oh, okay, so that's the name, Rooted. Eat
Yeah.
more plants, thank you. So anyway, my daughter was all excited. She was going to take us out to eat dinner there, and we had the burrito. They made the burritos either with shell or burrito in a bowl. So you have the option to use the processed tortilla or leave the processed tortilla on the side and just have the bowl with the ingredients that they put in this burrito. It was not oily. It was not fatty. It was magnificent. My mouth is watering talking about it right now. And I ate more than I probably should have eaten because I gobbled up some of Christine's. She had a tofu dish of some sort, and I can't remember. It was a little sweeter than I'm used to, but it was still mighty good. And it was a wonderful restaurant. And I told her we could use a restaurant like yours up in Eugene. And she said, well, that may come in the future, that they had been doing some thinking about that, but they were just a young business right now. So I plan to keep encouraging her to consider Eugene as the next location, because it was a wonderful place to eat at a very reasonable price, actually. Yes?
What about eating vegan foods at a restaurant?
Well, that's what this was, a vegan food at the restaurant. You must be careful about the amount of salt, sugar, and fat. There are some restaurants, which I'm not going to name right now in Eugene, where they use a kind of what I would consider an excessive amount of oils and fats. And even though the food tastes good and what you might be used to with the standard American diet, it's not the healthiest food choices. It's like you can become a junk food vegan, where you're eating a lot of processed flours or processed grains. You can be eating a lot of processed carbohydrates, like sugars are put in things, and cakes and cookies. They can be vegan. So just because the restaurant is vegan, one must be very careful. I must say, the restaurant of choice that I've been using up in Eugene has been Yum for me, YUMM. And I tell them, use half the Yum sauce because it has a lot of fat and oil in it. But if you want a little bit more of that, you can use the regular Yum sauce. Anybody else have any thoughts on healthy choices here in Eugene? There's Govindo's. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's over on River Road, and I really enjoyed their food also, but we've only eaten once there. We don't eat out a lot, and I wouldn't encourage you to eat out a lot.
Yeah, how do you spell that restaurant?
Govinda,
Govinda.
Thank you, Jerry. They're nice people. It's good food for an occasional treat.
And on that Yum sauce, dip your fork in it. Don't even pour it on your Yum,
Good thought, Jerry. Thank you. So let's see. So we've got roots done. Anybody have any stories they want to share? Because if you don't, I have to share a story, and then I'll yield up the floor to Eric. My story goes something like this. I saw a patient at Volunteer in Medicine yesterday. First time I'd ever seen this person. They said to me that they had been having problems with their weight, and they were diabetic or whatever it is. And so I said, so you're probably kind of confused as to what to eat for your diabetes. He says, well, not really. I've been taking insulin like I'm supposed to, and I'm doing my thing. I said, well, tell me, what's the cause of diabetes? He says, well, carbohydrates break down into sugar. I said, yeah, that's what we've been told a lot, and so we really believe that that's what happens. And actually does happen. I said, but what else do they tell you? They said, if you eat a lot of fiber, you're going to be able to control your diabetes better. I said, well, now I know why you're confused. Because then we started going through. We said, so when you eat plants or when you eat animals, you eat what? It's either protein, fat, or carbohydrate. There's some minerals, vitamins, and other plant nutrients, but the macronutrients are these three. So on one hand, they tell you, let's say this is carbohydrate. They say, don't eat any carbohydrates because it breaks down the sugar. So you stop eating those, and what do you eat? You eat fat and you eat protein. You get that from your animal products, right? You don't get carbohydrates from the animal products. And so, but then they tell you, eat fiber because that will help you control your diabetes. Well, where does fiber come from? He says, I don't know. I said, it comes from plants. The thing they told you not to eat. So how can you eat something and not eat something and be healthy? No wonder you're confused. I had really a lot of fun with that one. And with him, we laughed a little bit about that. And after we broke the ice, we continued on with the visit. Well, that was only one patient that I had yesterday. The second patient wrote me a note this morning. She was a gal who had been in the emergency department a week before with a little elevation of her lipase. She had a mild pancreatitis. They did studies and thought she had a gallstone that was blocking the common bile duct because it was kind of dilated. And it passed and she got better, but she was having terrible pain, thrashing, turning. Anyway, she was better. She's a bit overweight. And she said, I know I have to do something about my diet. I said, well, what are you eating? And she says, you know, I eat healthy. Eat a little chicken with vegetables and this and that and the other thing. And you know, we went through and it was more of the standard American diet kind of thing, lean meats and chicken. So I went through the full thing, downloaded Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen app. She says, I don't know about my husband doing something like this. This sounds kind of drastic. Well, she wrote me the note. Good morning. I just wanted to touch bases with you. I came home from my appointment with you yesterday, and my husband was completely on board. We spent the rest of the evening cleaning out our cupboards and fridge. We went and bought some bulk lentils, quinoa, fruits, and vegetables. We had an amazing salad with beans and chickpeas for our protein last night. This morning for breakfast, we made a breakfast scramble with potatoes, chopped Brussels sprouts, bell peppers, green onion, tofu, and lentils. I used chicken broth to steam fry the potatoes. Thanks so much again for your help. Was I thrilled or what? That's one visit on one patient. Okay, Kim, you got your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to let you know that my thyroid was checked after being on the iodine, and I don't have to do the extra thyroid. So that was really good. I know, I was really excited, and the doctor was too. So that's great. So I either take one of the seaweed or itself, or the drops, the kelp drops. So I was really thrilled. I didn't have to take any extra thyroid just because I changed my diet.
So you all hear that? We all need thanks for sharing that, Kim, a certain amount of iodine in our diet. If we're not getting it, we may wind up taking some thyroid medicine or more than we need to if we're not getting an adequate amount of iodine.
Where do you get the iodine from?
Scott?
Yeah, you can use a little bit of iodized salt on your plate when as long as you don't have too much, as far as blood pressure issues. Or you can do iodine supplement. You could do the sea vegetables like the kelp granules or dulse or wakame, some of the things like that. And that has some iodine in it as well. But yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody new in the room who wants to speak up and say, hey, we're new here and we found out about the classes this way? If not, it looks like I recognize most of the people here. Okay. Anybody care to share anything else before we kind of turn it over and let Dr. Colgrove carry on with the pediatric testing? It was a good lecture last week. We all enjoyed it.
Charlie, I had a quick question relating to Kim's.
Okay.
I don't have a thyroid. Mine was eradicated after mistreatment by a naturopathic physician.
Uh-huh.
And it was so bad, I was on the verge of heart failure and they eradicated my thyroid. So I don't feel I would probably be a candidate to try kelp and everything because I'm stable on my thyroid now. So I don't want to mess with a good thing because I've been okay for maybe 5-8 years on this particular thyroid med. So am I a candidate not for kelp and seaweed and everything? I'd love to get off the prescription, but
Well,
it's a little bit iffy.
The benefit of doing dulse or I don't necessarily recommend kelp because Dr. Greger says there might be a little too much iodine in kelp,
Yeah.
but he recommends dulse a package a month. It's for a couple reasons. One is the iodine, but the second reason, maybe the more important one that I started it for, was for the omega-3 fats that are in there. So if you're getting enough omega-3s from flaxseed and other sources, then that may be okay. But I'm kind of hedging my bets. I do the flaxseed and the dulse, a little strip. It's not very much. And it does add a little iodine. It doesn't add the full complement that is recommended, which is 100 micrograms, I think, a day.
150, isn't it?
Yeah, 150. Thank you. Yeah. Good to have the experts in the room to kind of correct each other. Easy to get a little confused.
Well, I think the next time I see Scott at my appointment, we'll talk about this because I'm a little bit uneasy about changing what's been so stable for me. And if it goes too high, I can go to a roof without a ladder. I have that much energy and it's over. It's too much. If I don't get enough, then I'm very sluggish and I have to be really careful about the dosage. But I've been so stable, I'm afraid to kind of change that at this time.
I understand. If you're feeling good, you might just continue on feeling good.
I just don't like to take medications. You know, that's the only thing I'm on at my young age. But I just as soon get rid of the thyroid to it by age 80 in just a couple of years. But we'll see. Well, thank you. I'll talk to Scott about it later.
But if you don't have a thyroid, I think it's important to take the thyroid medicine. Yeah, I think it's a different situation. I think you're kind of, it'd be nice to get rid of it if you had a thyroid, but with no thyroid, I would just continue the medicine.
I agree with that. Dolly, you have your hand raised.
I do something a little different.
Okay.
You guys were talking about the walk on, is it Spencer's Butte?
Yep.
Okay. Is that wheelchair friendly?
Oh, Skinner's Butte Park. Yes, it is wheelchair
Oh,
friendly.
it is.
Yeah, so it's the parking lot just west of the Campbell Community Center, and we're just going to go down on the bike path down there. So that'll be fine. Wheelchair friendly will be fine.
It's flat paved.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the question.
You know,
Okay.
I've been tired. Could that be because I'm not getting enough calories?
Yeah, definitely. You know, that's one of the problems with people who are first transitioning to a whole food plant-based lifestyle. You're eating a lower calorie density food, so you're getting considerably less calories than you're used to, unless you're eating a whole bunch. So you probably should try eating a lot more of those healthy foods as they're grown in nature. Beans, oatmeal, lentils, soy, quinoa, potatoes. Those are 400 to 600 calories a pound. So maybe you need to double what you're eating.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right,
Okay, Eric.
Eric, did you make me share this or co-host?
Oh, I could.
Actually, Charlie brought up the idea of asking, how do you eat? Are you eating good food? And it reminds me of the 10th media link that I sent. And it's a video from Greg recently that I thought would be really good to share. I wonder, Scott, if you could just share that. It doesn't really have to do with kids or family, but it has to do with just in general, why people feel like they eat just fine. So do you have that one? The one I just sent you? Sure.
You can see my screen?
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end, they kind of talk about cancer, and I don't know, I don't want people to feel like they I feel bad about having had cancer, because it's a little bit like, well, there's consequences we have to our diet. And so I kind of hesitate about the very end of the video. It talks more about cancer development. But anyways, the beginning is really interesting because it talks about why don't people eat healthier. So yeah, go ahead and play that.
Okay. You want me to cut it off once he starts talking about cancer? Or?
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Taking personal responsibility for our health is one of the most important things we can do. Regular exercise, not smoking, and eating a healthy diet can help prevent and even reverse some of our most common diseases. And most people know this, so why don't they eat healthier? Watch the video to find out. Yes, media messages surrounding nutrition are often inconsistent and confusing, but many Americans know what constitutes a healthy diet. I mean, does anyone really think drinking brown carbonated sugar water is good for them? At issue is that they don't appear to be translating their knowledge into action. There are a number of reasons people have such difficulty changing their dietary behaviors. While ignorance and confusion may play a part, the motivation to change is likely much more important. Certainly, we are living in a world that pushes us to eat whatever we want, regardless of the long-term consequences. But one of the major problems in getting people to change their behavior is the need to get them to recognize the need to change. For example, if you ask people how much meat they eat or how much greasy food, eggs, sweets, alcohol, butter, they claim to be eating less than the average person. So if people think they're at less risk than others, they may dismiss advice to eat more healthfully, thinking that they already eat healthier. Maybe they are? No. People rated their own eating behavior as healthier on average, even when their actual eating habits were terrible. For this reason, maybe health promoting campaigns need to make people aware of how badly they're eating. But when you do that, a strange thing happens. If you challenge people with the reality of what the average person actually eats, they change their answer to make themselves appear as though they're still healthier than average. When people's favorable comparisons on risky behaviors are threatened, they not only reduce their estimates of how often they engage in those behaviors, oh, I don't eat that much meat, but they also attenuate the significance of those behaviors. Meat's not that bad for you anyway. It's the same personal fable that smokers tell themselves. Studies show that smokers have a strong tendency to underestimate all smoking related risks, developing a series of illusions and false beliefs to support their choice to keep on smoking. Why do so many people continue to light up in spite of smoking's harmful effects to their health? For many of the same reasons people continue to eat unhealthy food. First, they convince themselves that they are less at risk than others who engage in the same behavior. And in addition to this optimism bias, smokers underestimate the extent to which smoking elevates lung cancer risk, thinking 2-pack-a-day smokers only have like 5 times the risk of getting lung cancer when their actual risk is 20-fold higher. And anyway, many smokers believe lung cancer is mainly determined by one's genes. Many food-related hazards share the same optimistic bias, such as heart attacks and heart disease, our number one killer, obesity, diabetes, and all the rest. People are often quite ingenious in finding reasons for believing that their own risk is less than the risk faced by their peers. So maybe public health advocates need to be just as ingenious in understanding the origins of this unrealistic optimism and in finding approaches to help people gain a more accurate picture of their own vulnerability. All sorts of work is being done trying to reduce or eliminate this bias, but we must consider the possibility that reductions in optimistic bias may lead to reductions in self-esteem and psychological well-being if people start to realize just how much risk they truly face and how much they have themselves to blame. This reminds me of the tightrope.
Is that good, Eric?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it just, I've been amazed recently thinking about asking people about their eating, and they're always, not always, but a lot of people seem to say, I eat pretty healthy. And I don't know if you guys have had that experience or talk to people, they think they're eating pretty healthy, but really, gee, the reality is we tend to kind of deceive ourselves. I don't know.
For me, it's always hard not to say, well, then I never say it because I don't want to make them feel bad or anything. It's like, well, then why do you still have diabetes or heart disease or on 10 different medications? You must
Right.
not be eating healthy as you think you are. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I know it causes all these, the reason you're on all these medications.
You're
Yeah.
getting all our secrets here.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, let me. Okay, it's not sharing. There it goes. Okay, so which screen do you see? It just says plant-based nutrition?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We talked about this stuff last week. I'm not going to go through all these. I have a lot more slides, but I'm not going to go through all this. But I want to talk just briefly, at least to have on the video, even some of the macro and micronutrients, so people can go back and pause it and see what they need for macro micronutrients. But the macronutrients, like Charlie said, there's three. There's fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Those are three. So it turns out that children do need more fat than like an adult would need. So you need 35 to 50% of the calories from fat, which is huge. Whole food, plant-based folks. Oh wait, can you see this? No, you can't. Okay. They typically would get only like 10 to 15% of the calories from fat. But by the way, on the standard American diet, an adult would get 35 to 40% of their calories from fat. And here, so it's a big reduction when you're eating whole food plant-based, but kids do need more in that same range, that 35 to 50% of their calories from fat. So a lot. Kids have this growing brain, they really need a lot more fat. It should be, healthier fats, much healthier fats. It should be fats that are not saturated with, the saturated fats are the ones that are really the unhealthy ones that lead to many more problems with eventually diabetes and high cholesterol issues. Those are really the ones you want to avoid. Let's see. So I also wanted to mention that from this slide that breast milk, as far as protein goes, breast milk only contains 6% protein, 6% of the calories of breast milk. From growing that tiny baby, it's growing rapidly. It's unbelievable. It's doubling its size, tripling its size in that first year. Is doing that on 6% protein. So you hear about this, people talking about how much protein you need when you're building all this muscle and stuff. Well, why are babies doing it and only using 6%? That's remarkable. So, any questions about that? Any thoughts or questions? Let me move on. I've also got like a little sample. I got some samples on here that talk about how there's a sample menu kind of stuff, how to easily get fats and proteins into food, into babies' menus. So you can look at that later. Let me go on to this next one, and that is just about carbohydrates. I mean, so people talk about carbohydrates all the time, carbs, and say they're bad, but carbohydrates, yeah, they're the stuff of life. You really have to have carbohydrates. But here's kind of the split. You can see on the top half, it just the whole carbohydrate, the whole food. And the carbohydrates down below is that processed carbohydrate. Those are the bad kind of aspects of carbohydrates that cause so many of our health problems in the United States. That's pretty self-explanatory. Whole versus processed. Yeah, and here's where I start getting into micronutrients. And I don't know that I was planning on just talking about all these things. These are probably the most important micronutrients. Whole food, plant-based, keto needs to pay a special attention to that in their diet. And vitamin B12 particularly is an important one, vitamin B12. So here's kind of how much you need. And actually you need a pretty small dose.
Sorry, Kim Clark, can you mute yourself?
I muted.
Okay, great. The vitamin B12, oftentimes supplements have way too much in there, and it may not be a great thing to get tons of vitamin B12. Get a little extra and your body's going to pee it out, but get too much extra and there may be some other problems. What one of the experts, one of the experts in this field, one of the original, is T. Colin Campbell, and he says what he does is he recommends using a multivitamin, because multivitamin does have small amounts until somebody really makes a better vitamin or a multivitamin that really caters to people who are on a plant-based diet. Maybe that's the way to go, is just to go ahead and use a multivitamin like T. Colin Campbell says. So that is the B12. Vitamin D, like I said, was also important. Remember, vitamin D, let me go back. Vitamin D is also, remember, that is not a vitamin, it's actually a hormone. So it's one of those things that really is important from the sun. The sun helps your skin to create this hormone that is actually complete once it goes to the kidney. So it's a complex system, but this is something that is really important. Back in the day, thousands of years ago, we were out in the sun much, much more. And because we don't do that, we're not out in the sun quite nearly as much. Many of us are vitamin D deficient, and this causes all kinds of medical problems. Probably the biggest thing is the immune system. It can cause metabolic problems, so which means sort of how your body uses energy. So I see a lot of vitamin D deficiency in my clinic, and typically it's kind of nebulous symptoms. They're usually fatigue. Their energy is just really low, and they just kind of don't feel well. Or it seems like I see more people with mood problems, more depression than people with vitamin D deficiency. I think there's just a bunch of nebulous kind of symptoms with it, but definitely recommend vitamin D if you're on a plant-based diet. Iron's going to be an important one too. If there's a page about iron, so you can look at the risk factors for iron deficiency and the iron requirements for the first 2 years of life down here. And I'm kind of just going through these real quick, so we have them on the, if you want to ask more questions, or at least if we have them on the video, so we can go back and look at what these are. Here's all the different things. Zinc's another one that is important, that can get low in people who eat a really strict plant-based diet and aren't thinking about how to replace some of your zinc use. So there's zinc. Here's the iodine one, and the iodine's interesting too, because there are a number of ways to get it. Now, Charlie didn't mention that you can get iodine from a multivitamin. My simple multivitamin from Costco has 100% of the nutritional, 100% of the RDA for iodine. So I don't have to think about this anymore. I was using a supplement tablet that had kelp because I wasn't eating like a set amount of sea vegetables every day, and I thought that was kind of hard to be consistent anyways. So I ended up using a supplement that had the use kelp. But at least kelp might have too much iodine, but it was supposedly standardized. So I was feeling good about that. But I just realized that my multivitamin from Costco has the perfect amount of iodine in it, and also it has all the things that I need as well. So I'm kind of thinking more about the issue of maybe these multivitamins that are standard multivitamin that has things like iodine and zinc and that kind of stuff. Maybe that's the way to go. It may not have enough vitamin D, and so I do take extra vitamin D for sure. Let's see, there's calcium, calcium over here, and then we've got choline right here. Choline is a vitamin B-like nutrient that is important for a baby's brain growth. The main source of choline is eggs, but for plant-based foods, it's found abundantly in soy and in smaller amounts, wheat germ, and things like broccoli. But there's really no need to supplement choline in a young plant-based child. Just important to remember to feed them some soy so you can get some choline for the brain. So, and then calcium. Actually, Scott, I wonder if we could stop share. Well, we're going to talk about calcium. Actually, let me stop sharing, see if anybody's got questions. I kind of went through that really quick. I didn't want to sort of just really delve into it tremendously. I wanted to skim the stuff, and if you want to go back to it, just go back to this lecture on the recorded lecture, and you can see exactly what these requirements are, so you're not having to write them all down. At least they're all in there. But yeah, Scott, there was a video number 5.
Okay.
Or is it number 6? Wait, let me see.
Nancy will get to you after this video.
Yes, number 6, but Scott, 5:45. Stop that if you can.
Stop it at 5:45.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is Lumen, the first device for hacking your metabolism. With just
We got ads.
Let's talk about calcium. According to the MESA, it's called Multi-Ethnic Study of Atherosclerosis Study, eating foods that contain calcium does not increase the risk of cardiovascular disease, but taking calcium supplements can increase the risk of coronary artery calcification, or CAC. Researchers determined that while high total calcium intake was associated with a decreased risk of atherosclerosis when the calcium came from food, the opposite was true, and the risk of CAC was 22% higher for participants who took calcium supplements as compared to those who didn't. So eat the calcium in food, has a protective effect. Eat the calcium in supplements or fortified foods, it has a health destroying effect. According to senior author Dr. Erin Michos from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, she says, I think most of the cardiology community has already bought into the fact that there's no cardiovascular benefit for these multivitamins or supplements. So most cardiologists won't be recommending or prescribing calcium supplements. The larger question, though, is whether if they have patients on them, they're going to tell them to stop. She went on to say, everybody agrees that dietary calcium seems to be safe, but I personally think the data for supplements is inconclusive and that the body metabolizes calcium very differently when it comes from supplements versus diet. My gosh, this woman could work here and give lectures. Michos also said that in addition to increasing the risk for coronary artery calcification, calcium supplements increase the risk of kidney stones, bloating, constipation, and many other conditions. This is not the only study that has shown that taking calcium supplements increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. A meta-analysis of 15 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies showed that taking calcium pills increases the risk of heart attack by about 30%. The researchers noted that, quote, the widespread use of calcium supplements means that even a small increase in the incidence of cardiovascular disease could translate into a large burden of disease in the population. The likely adverse effects of calcium supplements on cardiovascular events suggest that a reassessment and the role of calcium supplements in the prevention and treatment of osteoporosis is warranted. And this is very true. Most people really aren't taking calcium supplements because they think that they're going to protect themselves against cardiovascular disease. They're taking them because they think that it's needed for bone health. Calcium supplements and calcium fortified foods are promoted that way, but neither are needed in order to meet daily calcium needs. In fact, I've been saying for years, and more people are getting on this page, that calcium recommendations are highly overblown. The average person can deal with 400 to 500 milligrams of calcium a day is enough. And intake above that much doesn't necessarily improve bone health. And it is so easy to get that amount of calcium from food. One example I use is that an orange, medium-sized orange, has 110 to 120 milligrams of calcium. Well, most people don't think of oranges as being high calcium foods, and 110 or 120 milligrams of calcium doesn't sound like very much if you're trying to take in 1,500 milligrams of calcium a day, but when we're in that 400 to 500 milligrams per day range, 120 sounds actually pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, 20 to 25% of your needs. So anyway, the bottom line, it is better to get your calcium from food. In fact, it is better to get all of your nutrients from food than it is to get them in supplements.
Yeah, I think that's really key that, so many people take calcium supplements, but don't understand that everything we take that's a supplement may have risks like, oh my gosh, heart attacks. So if you weigh those heart attacks that we see with calcium, they're not really outweighing the benefits is not outweighing the risks of it. And so, that said, if you have osteoporosis, if you've had a gastric bypass, if you've got some other issue where you need to take calcium, definitely need to listen to your doctor about what calcium you need to take. But I think the general sort of person who's like, oh, I need to build strong bones, young, healthy person, I think shouldn't be on calcium. It makes me a little bit worried. And that's true of kids too. So kids, you get your calcium, really get this calcium from greens and beans. And the speaker said, you can get there's a lot of fruits and vegetables that even have, you just don't think about this being calcium packed. And oranges, yeah, one of those fruits that just happen to have a fair amount of calcium. If we're thinking about getting that 400 micrograms of calcium, which is more in line for this 400 to 500 is kind of what we see with the Europeans suggesting what we should be eating, not what the Americans suggest. The American suggestion is probably really influenced heavily by the dairy industry, which is hugely strong here, and they may have inflated what the USDA says we need, and that's probably not for our health benefit, but for the benefit of the dairy industry. Yeah. Yes, Nancy.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah,
There
yes,
you
I
go.
was looking for my little symbol. Well, ironically, that was right on point for the question I was going to ask, because my doctor has prescribed calcium. Obviously, I'm of an age where I need it, but I've been coming across the same studies she referenced, thinking that it's not good to take supplemental calcium, but also that so I'm reading about other sources, understand the concerns about dairy, but in the plant-based sources, what do you do about the bioavailability when you're dealing with things like phytates and things like that, that interfere with absorption? It becomes kind of a complicated picture I haven't figured out yet, because I want to stop. Well, I haven't stopped taking the calcium supplement prescribed after reading all that stuff, but it's sort of a dilemma when you have all these factors coming into play that you can't figure out how to make it work. So do you have a thought about that?
Yeah, well, I think that that I know it's safer to get your calcium from food than it is from supplements. So there may be things that block some of our calcium absorption, but the fact is I don't worry about it too much. I really just feel like as long as we're taking food that is whole food, you're going to be getting it, especially if you're getting greens and beans. And you can look at, the other issue is things like soy. So I think soy, beans, and greens, those are really huge ones.
Collard
Yeah,
greens.
collards.
Collard greens is what we eat every day. A cup is 225 milligrams of calcium. That's
Yes, but it's not just what the plant holds, it's what you're able to absorb in your body without interference. I mean, it's okay to say not worry about it, but I need to worry about it. I
well,
need to know how it really works.
Well, you're going to have to find sources that you trust. If you trust on your doctor to give you the advice and your doctor says you got to take the calcium, then you could weigh that against the risk of increased rate of heart attack and stroke associated with the supplemental calcium. Weigh that against, am I getting enough calcium otherwise? I know when I graduated from medical school back in 74 or 5, we didn't really talk about osteoporosis at all. And likely that's because of the foods that we're eating. So if you're eating the standard American diet, maybe you do need to take some calcium and have the risk of heart attack and stroke. But if you're eating a whole food plant-based diet, like Dr. Colgrove says, you're going to get enough calcium. That's what our resources, Dr. Greger, Dr. Bernard, Dr. McDougall, they all say that, and the phytates and the other contradictory, conflicting, I would say pseudoscience, but it sounds important, but not necessarily backed up by fact, that it's going to interfere so much that you don't get adequate absorption. It's been my experience that there are people who are eating whole plant foods who do get, I don't know of anybody actually who has gotten considerably worse doing when you're measuring like a DEXA scan. The DEXA scans are kind of equivocal in their reliability. If you have one DEXA scan and go to another, it can be confusing because you're told that you have now osteoporosis and you don't really have it. So you need to, weigh all those factors and find which sources do you really trust. And we've come to trust Greger. We've come to trust Bernard. So I would encourage you to focus on who you're going to trust.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I have read Dr. Greger's book. I am reading other books. I spent 50 years as a researcher. That was the main part of my job. And so, you know, this is kind of my wheelhouse, to go to lots of places and see where there are contradictions in balance. So yeah, I'm just working on that, and I'm glad to have additional conversation about it. And in fact, I actually had a question about Dorothea's comment, because in all of the things I've been reading forever and recently, now that I'm really digging into things, olive oil has been considered a healthy fat. And I haven't heard anybody say it until tonight that it wasn't a healthy fat. So I'm a little baffled by that. And I'd like to know, if you don't consider first cold pressed pure olive oil a good fat, what do you consider a good fat?
Well, I don't think I heard someone say that it's a unhealthy fat. What I heard was that it's not a health food.
Right.
So it's not a health food.
Well, adults need fats too, as well as children, correct?
Right. So you get all the fat you need from the food you eat. And so if you're, as Eric said earlier, a 100% whole food plant-based diet is generally about 10 to 15% fat. That's how many percent of the calories are fat, which is plenty for an adult. You know, kids need a little bit more. Kids need, 30 to 50%, as Eric said, which for them, the way they're not going to, you don't want to give them a bunch of olive oil, because that's not, yeah, it has some healthy fats in it, but it has unhealthy fat in it, and it's not a food. It's actually acts more like a drug in the body. So the way to get healthy fats into adults and to kids is to eat the whole plant foods. And so the kids need a little bit fattier foods like avocados, nuts and seeds, nut butters, things like that, because they're going to be a little bit, and soy, because they're going to be a little bit higher in fat, so that their growing brains will get the little bit more that they need. But for you and I, olive oil, it actually injures our arteries. It injures us. And so it's not a health food. So you're better off eating olives than eating the olive oil, if that makes sense.
Okay,
So oil is
which plant-based foods, I don't want to take all the time, but are there some vegetables then that are the best sources of healthy fats?
So just what I just mentioned there. So nuts and seeds, and those have the healthiest fats,
Okay.
the omega-3.
Okay.
And then like chia seeds, flax seeds, sea vegetables also have the omega-3, the healthier omega-3s. So those are what you want to focus on. But go back and watch, if you haven't watched the recorded lecture on nutritional myths and other popular diets that I did earlier several weeks back. It's a really important one, because I think it's when your perspective is very common with people kind of focus too much on nutrients and not on the food. And it's really the food that's important in nutrition. And, we mentioned the calcium, and then we're talking about vitamins and things. And, there are a few little tweaks, and this is kind of like master's level with nutrition. We're trying to, make sure you're getting enough of these certain vitamins and minerals, but 99% of the time, you're going to get all the proper vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, the right amount of carbohydrate, protein, fat, everything you're going to get from whole plant foods, just eating the food, and you don't really need to worry about all the other stuff. And going back to
my researcher's brain, if
I know,
somebody tells me don't worry about it, I start worrying about it.
Right. Well, that's not just something you'll have to work on. So watch that lecture on nutritional myths and other popular diets, because I just want to make one other comment about calcium that was kind of embarrassing for the dairy industry. They actually they were trying to find cases of calcium deficiency. They actually, researchers scoured the world literature, and there was not one case of calcium deficiency documented that could be found. And so calcium is not a nutrient of concern. You're eating whole plant foods.
Tell that to my doctor.
No, there's no calcium deficiency. But
Nancy, I'd encourage you to go to nutritionfacts.org.
I have, but there are controversies around that, so I need to get it all.
You could do a search on calcium, and you could look at the videos, you could look at all the resources that that he's used. Look at the articles and research them yourself
That's what I've been doing.
and
yeah.
decide whether his conclusions are accurate. I've not had anybody come back and tell me on that issue of calcium that there is any problem with his conclusion. So you might be the first. I'd love, I love the challenge. So go
I
at
haven't
it.
seen that particular video. This is just my third class.
Right.
So
There are two videos that he has. One is, are calcium supplements effective? And the other is, are they safe? So do a search for calcium, but also go to the resources tab, because the articles are listed. You can click on them. You can read through what he has used as the basis for those videos.
yeah, and that's helpful because I always go to the original research because I don't assume the conclusions are the same conclusions I would make,
Well,
so
that's good. And we love you bringing up these questions, really.
it's
Yeah.
very helpful to me that you accept the questions.
It adds to the class, and we don't expect to say something and everybody just scoops it up and okay, that's the gospel. That's not how these classes work. So
So
thank
this
you.
isn't church, this is science, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Abby and Doug.
Oh yeah. Wait, can I say something about that?
Of course, Eric, go.
Just that it's also, this class is a lot about discussing about how we do things ourselves and what our preferences are. For my fat intake, my preference is to eat a lot of avocado and to eat walnuts. I eat walnuts every day. It's like a vitamin for me. I mean, it's so walnuts are wonderful. And also the other thing I eat almost every day is chia seeds. I make chia seed pudding and it's delicious. Some people don't like it. I don't know why. I love the texture. I love everything about it, but I'm a chia weirdo, I guess. But yeah, of course the ground flaxseed. Yes, every day. So
Yeah, thanks,
those
that's
four
helpful.
first. Mhm.
Yeah. Yes, I'm walnut crazy too. I just
Nice.
made a big walnut salad.
Yes, I love it. Okay, sorry.
Okay, Abby and Doug.
Question I had is that I have osteoporosis, and so the doctor did tell me to take calcium supplements for that. What have you said for a typical person, if they're getting 400 to 500 portions of calcium per day, that would be okay. What about for a person with osteoporosis that has been diagnosed with osteoporosis? Is there a certain amount that would be recommended that we could aim at getting through food and then be able to drop the calcium supplement?
What you're gonna take it, Eric? You want me to do it?
No, please. I'm a pediatrician, so I don't deal with that.
Yeah. So the recommendation with osteoporosis would be 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day. But the thing is what you have to always remember when we talk about these recommendations, this is on the typical standard American eating the typical standard American diet. And so like Charlie alluded to earlier, he mentioned earlier, is that, yeah, if you're eating meat and dairy and eggs and processed foods, like 99% of Americans, then yeah, you might really do need to get that 1,200 milligrams of calcium. And if you can't get it from your diet, you might decide to take the supplement. But what we're saying is if you're trending toward a more whole food plant-based diet, you're going to be getting plenty of calcium for one, but your calcium requirements are not going to be 1,200 milligrams because like Eric mentioned earlier, most other countries only recommend 400 to 500 milligrams of calcium a day, and it's the dairy industry that got us jacked up to 1,200 milligrams and even 1,500 milligrams. And so if you have to kind of remember, okay, I'm not smoking, I'm getting my weight-bearing exercise, I'm eating a mostly whole food plant-based diet, and you're taking your vitamin D, which for vitamin D3, you'd want to be taking 2,000 international units of that. And so then I would just say if you meet that profile, you're getting your weight-bearing exercise, you're not smoking, you're eating a mostly whole food plant-based diet, you're taking your 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 a day, then I would just be getting my calcium. I'd recommend just getting your calcium from whole plant foods and don't worry about the supplement or getting 1,200 milligrams, if that makes sense.
Just look at the table for calcium. Look at those foods. Look at the top one, collard greens, 357 milligrams per serving, 1 cup of collard greens. It's really not that hard. You look at, a lot of times plant milks are fortified, so they'll have extra stuff, but tofu is going to give you, 300 grams ish. You're going to get a lot just by eating just your whole food plant-based diet.
Well, thank you for those guidelines. I really appreciate that because I've been struggling with, do I want to take it? Do I want to stop taking it? So this is really helpful. Thank you.
Good.
Well,
Yeah.
again, I would encourage you to consider going to nutritionfacts.org, watch those 2 videos. Are calcium supplements effective? Are calcium supplements safe? Just do a search for calcium, then share those 2 videos with your doctor and get your doctor's opinion after watching them.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. I thought maybe one of my videos was the Gregor calcium video, but I don't think it is. Yeah, just do it exactly what Charlie said. Go to nutritionfacts.org and type in calcium and you'll see the couple of videos come out there. This is a good group that talks about a lot of plant-based eating for toddlers and children and baby infants and toddlers and children. But basically they also, they have a guide for looking at supplements for plant-based eaters, they're young plant-based eaters. So they actually have a free guide. You can go to the site and they have a free guide that's going to give you an idea about getting the right supplements in for your child. So I recommend checking that out. And here's something else they recommend is multivitamins. Certain sources, certain companies of multivitamins, there are none of them that are perfect, these multivitamins. So there's no perfect multivitamin, but here's some different ones that you can look at for kids on their website, the plant-based juniors. The picky eaters are really kind of a pain. And what I talk about with parents and picky eaters is, when you give your kids junk foods, they're basically, because a lot of kids are eating a whole range of things at age 1. But of course, at age 1, they're eating very simple foods. They're not eating sort of complex foods and junk foods. That parents are giving them, very simple kind of squash foods, pureed foods that they've made themselves or they get from Gerber. Much simpler kind of foods, and they tend to be very good eaters. But by the time they're 2, I see in my practice, I see that, probably 30-40% of kids become picky eaters. Why are they becoming picky eaters? Probably because they've been exposed to the really dense junk foods that cause problems, that really light up their brains. When you think about this idea that junk foods and processed foods are very dense in calories, but light up our brains and really make our brains go, wow, that was good. Why would our brains do that? Well, it has to do with millions of years ago. Millions of years ago, we needed to have a system that made our brain light up when whenever there was when we found a stash of calories that was nice and good set of calories, because that's what would make us survive, is finding calories, a good stash of calories. So when we found those things, like let's say when you found, let's say 2 million years ago, you found like a bee's nest and suddenly you got honeycomb and honey, and oh my goodness, that would have been just the amazing treat that would have kept you alive for quite a while. And so that had to be something that would have to go off in your brain to say, hey, this is something we got to remember. This is good foods that's going to keep us alive. And the problem is nowadays is that is a stimulus in our bodies, in our brains, that is really, really poisoning our system, because it then becomes everything lights up in our head whenever we're eating the most dense, the most processed, the most junk food. It lights up. We go, yeah, we like that kind of food. Well, that's we have to retrain ourselves to understand that is not what our bodies want or need. It really, our brain may be saying, yes, I want to have those dense calories, but that's not right. And so that's what's happening between the ages of 1 and 2. Is there some parents are starting to give more processed foods, and those kids are lighting up, their brains are lighting up every time they have some processed food. And the natural foods, the good foods suddenly are not that interesting to them anymore. So then the parents say, oh, gee, my kid doesn't like that kind of stuff anymore. He only likes this, he only likes McDonald's fries. And believe me, I've got plenty of parents who go out every single day and get McDonald's fries. And because they fall into this trap. It's that trap where you can't get out of if you are being a slave to your own brain, being excited about those dense calories. So yeah, any questions about that? Any thoughts? Have you experienced that before, anybody? Or any thoughts or questions or stories about?
I like your comment that picky eaters are pains, because they are. We have in the family, and it is, it's just really a drag.
It is tough, no matter if you're a picky eater and you're plant-based or standard American diet. I think it's just more people who are getting a lot of that processed foods. They become pickier. So try to avoid it, because it is a huge pain. So thanks for that comment, because that's the truth. It's tough. It's kind of reminds me of like people who have peanut allergies. Oh, is that tough? Having kids with peanut allergies and having to read every single label for peanut allergies. So really recommend trying to avoid peanut allergies by exposing those kids to that peanut allergy, as like mentioned last time too. So you want to expose those young children early on to help prevent the peanut allergies.
So Lisa, you have any thoughts about any questions, any suggestions? How about kids? Getting them excited about eating foods. Have you thought about that? Is that an issue? Do you have any young kids in your life?
Wow, that's a lot of questions. I don't have any young kids of mine in my life, but I was a teacher at an elementary school in Denver for a while, and we had, I guess, lunch duty. And so we would see kids go in the cafeteria line, and it is really sad to see what is fed in a lot of schools, especially lower income schools, which is where I was at, or even parents who would bring the McDonald's fries and drop it off at the school. So I've always, that's been a goal of mine in the future, is to change policy and change the way that students are fed at school, because really they're eating, but they're so starved of the nutrients that they need. And then they go back in the classroom and they're all hyped up on sugar and they can't focus, and then their stomachs hurt too, and they're wondering why, and they just aren't able to learn because of what the school is feeding them. Like those pink strawberry milks in the little plastic packages. I don't know why they love them. It's just so gross, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're not too different from kids, especially like teenagers. We all just eat what's in front of us. So we are all a bit lazy to a certain extent, and we can use that to our advantage by having the good food readily available and keeping the bad food out. That's why, they say don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. Because you're just going to be tempted in ways that you wouldn't be if you were, you know, trying to think about the future. So that kind of related to the comment I made in the chat just about how tobacco use was declining over the last several decades. You know, for a long time, people already knew that smoking was bad for you, but it wasn't until they changed the policy and made it inconvenient that people actually really stopped doing it. So, you know, you can start small, keep the chips on the top shelf, out of sight, out of mind, and then you'll realize that you didn't actually even miss it and you got through a day without having to eat any, and then it just becomes habit.
Well, thanks for that input. And I just want to ask you one further question, because who we trust in this world is important. And, you know, you're a medical student and you're inquisitive and you don't want to just suck up false information. What do you think about the resources, Gregor or Bernard or whatever it is, in your experience with what you've looked around and with the counseling of other people? What's your thoughts on who you trust?
Well, considering how much tuition I pay, I'd really like to trust my school, but we don't really talk a lot about nutrition. And so it is great to have these other resources. Nutritionfacts.org, I first heard from my first nutrition professor at UCSD. And so that's always been something that I go to. But you know, nutrition research is challenging because everybody is different. Everybody reacts differently to the same food sometimes. So even if it's plant-based, some people may not have a good reaction to it. And so part of what I've done over the last few years is test these things out on myself. So I tried a while going gluten-free, see how that affected me. I had a friend of a friend who went gluten-free and suddenly grew like a foot, because I don't know why, but some people have different reactions, and he had some other medical issues, but went gluten-free, and then it was a life changer for him. But for me, I don't feel like I had much sensitivity to it. I didn't really feel too much of a difference going off of it. And then I tried doing dairy-free and see how that affected me. So I've tried adding and omitting things, and it takes time and patience, but it's worth it to see what diet works for you. And then all the research that we've talked about is, you know, is good guidance for you, but really you should try it out for yourself and build your own testimony for it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We love to hear from you for sure. Now, there is a question. What age is the peanut butter introduction, Eric?
It is 6 months, but you can actually do it as early as 4 months. I say 6 months because that is when typically kids start eating solid foods. But when I say solid, I mean kind of mushed up or pureed foods. And you can do it earlier. So there really isn't a younger age limit for it. It's just when you start feeding foods, it's a good idea to introduce some. You can just take a peanut, crush it up, sprinkle it on some baby food. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or thin out some peanut butter in it with a little water and mix it in with whatever else you're feeding. Yeah.
Thank you. Nancy.
Oh, thanks. Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to Lisa for focusing on the, her approach in general, very gratifying, but also the approach to the school food issue. I worked in schools for many years, and I would say that there's very little truly wholesome food at school, you know, for a lot of reasons, but anyone with the energy and time to have a big effect in the nutrition world would do well to devote some energy towards school food. You know, the return on investment would be very high for any kind of progress there. Oh, and I wanted to ask you one other thing. I had heard about something called Food Revolution lectures. Is that something that you guys deliver or know about?
Yeah, we know about it. I listened to them today. They're free lectures. I think there will be 3 more tomorrow. If it's by John and Ocean Robbins. John Robbins is the Baskin Robbins son who gave up the ice cream business to focus on nutrition. So they've got a series of excellent speakers. And so you don't have to buy their program. I think it's $97 if you want all the lectures and videos and written transcripts, but if you can listen for free, either in the morning, it's from 8 to 11 o'clock, or you can listen over the next 21 hours. There you can listen for free.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's
So I
called,
can just Google it and find it.
yeah, it's called the Food Revolution, or Robbins Food Revolution. And it's worth listening to. Today they had Kim Williams speaking on heart issues, along with Columbus Batiste.
Yeah.
He spoke on heart issues, so you could still hear them tonight, even if you go to the Food Revolution.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Anybody else?
Carry on, Eric.
All right. Let's see. So here's something about growth there, but I think I'm gonna pass all this kind of stuff up. Let me why don't we do media link number 7, Scott? Let me stop sharing and let's just do number 7. This is about growth, kids. All right.
Prediabetes is not just a high-risk state for the development of diabetes. Prediabetes can be a disease in itself. People with prediabetes may already have damage to their eyes, kidneys, blood vessels, and heart. Evidence from numerous studies suggests that the chronic complications of type 2 diabetes start to develop during the pre-diabetic state. So by the time we have prediabetes, it may already be too late to prevent organ damage. So best to prevent prediabetes in the first place. And the earlier, the better. 30 years ago, virtually all diabetes in young individuals was thought to be autoimmune type 1 diabetes. But since the mid-90s, we started seeing an increase in type 2 diabetes among our youth, particularly in the United States. Indeed, the term adult onset diabetes has now been scrapped and replaced with type 2 because children as young as 8 are now developing the disease, and the effects can be devastating. A 15-year follow-up of children diagnosed with type 2 diabetes found an alarming rate in young adults of blindness, amputation, kidney failure, and death in young adulthood. Why the dramatic rise in childhood diabetes? Because of the dramatic rise in childhood obesity. During the past 30 years, the number of children diagnosed as being overweight has increased more than 100%. Once an obese child reaches 6, they're likely to stay that way. And even if they don't, being overweight in our youth predicts adult disease and death regardless of adult body weight, even if we lose it. Being an overweight teen may predict disease risk 55 years later, twice the risk of dying from a heart attack, more cancer, gout, arthritis. In fact, being overweight as a teen was a more powerful predictor of these risks than being overweight in adulthood. This underscores the importance of focusing on preventing childhood obesity. So how do we do it? From the official American Academy of Pediatrics clinical practice guidelines, the problem appears to be kids eating too much fat and added sugars and not eating enough fruits and vegetables. Doctors at every occasion, beginning soon after a child's birth, should endeavor to give sound advice regarding nutrition and growth so that obesity and its complications may be curtailed. What might sound advice sound like? Well, the chair of the nutrition department at Loma Linda University published a paper suggesting not eating meat at all might be an effective strategy. Population studies have consistently shown that vegetarians are thinner than comparable non-vegetarians. This is the largest such study to date. A body mass index of over 30 is considered obese, 25 to 30 overweight, and under 25 ideal weight. The non-vegetarians were up at 28.8. The average meat eater in the US is significantly overweight. As one gets more and more plant-based, the average BMI drops. But even the average vegetarian in the US is overweight. The only dietary group that was on average ideal weight were those eating strictly plant-based. So that comes out to be about a 33-pound difference between the vegans and the meat eaters. Vegetarian children grow up not only thinner, but taller. Vegetarian kids grow to be about an inch taller than other kids. Apparently, meat intake is somehow negatively associated with height. I can just hear the Dairy Council now saying, oh, it's because of all the milk the veggie kids must be drinking. No, the veg kids consume significantly less dairy and much lower animal protein intake overall. Meat intake is apparently associated with growing wider, though. In school-age children, the consumption of animal foods, meat, dairy, or eggs, is associated with an increased risk of overweight. Whereas plant-based equivalents like veggie burgers, veggie dogs, veggie cold cuts were not, and whole plant foods like grains, beans, and nuts were found to be protective. This may be because plant-based diets are low in energy density, high in starch, fiber, and water, which may increase feelings of fullness and resting energy expenditure, meaning resting metabolic rate. Eating plant-based appears to boost metabolism, so we just kind of burn more calories at rest, even when you're sleeping. However, we're not sure how much of the benefits are due to increased consumption of plant foods versus the decreased consumption of meat. Either way, plant-based diets should be encouraged and promoted for optimal health. Local, national, international food policies are warranted to support social marketing messages and to reduce the social, cultural, economic, and political forces that make it difficult to promote such diets. For example, although the advice to consume a plant-based diet is sound, questions arise regarding the relative high price of produce. Yes, we can reduce the burden of childhood obesity, prevent the further spread of disease, but we need to ensure that plant foods are affordable and accessible to children of all income levels. Fruits and vegetables may not fit on the dollar menu, but our kids are worth it. Getting diabetes in childhood cuts nearly 20 years off their life. Who among us wouldn't go to the ends of the earth to enable our kids to live 20 years longer?
All right. Well, we can start wrapping things up. What other questions do you guys have here? Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay. First, we're going to start with Jerry, then we'll go to Marcia.
When earlier, when they were talking about 5% protein, 5 or 6% in the mother's milk, it reminded me of the China study. Wasn't that where they, or was that a different one, Charlie, where they were working with the kids and they couldn't afford to feed them meat, so they had to feed them vegetables and liver cancer diminished?
I don't know, that was
that
with
in the
children. I
Philippines?
think it was with mice and rats or whatever.
Oh, I thought it was with children. Seriously.
Yeah, there
Because
was
the-
an aspect of that.
Yeah,
it
because
was-
they were getting the diseases because of the high, see, they were more affluent, so they were eating better, okay? And they were getting
I see.
sick.
In the early
Yeah,
part.
it was T. Colin Campbell who was golfing with the surgeon, and the surgeon was talking about how he's doing all these surgeries on livers in kids in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And it was with kids. Yeah, and it was those kids that were too poor to eat a bunch of meat. They were eating vegetables, but not meat. Those kids were okay, but the kids who were of the higher caste, the higher society in the Philippines were getting this liver cancer. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, good point.
Mhm.
All right, Marcia. You need to unmute.
I knew that. Sorry about
Okay.
that. You keep hearing this expression, pre-diabetes. Keep hearing that there is no such thing. Why do they call it pre-diabetes?
Scott, you want to take that?
Yeah, so prediabetes is based on blood labs, and so a fasting blood sugar between 100 and 125, that's diagnostic for prediabetes. So that's not quite diabetes. Diabetes would be a fasting blood sugar over 126. Another way to measure it is with a hemoglobin A1C, and that's a 3-month blood sugar average test. And prediabetes diagnosis for that is an A1C of 5.7% up to 6.4%, and then diabetes is 6.5% and above. And
So there is a pre-diabetes then.
Correct, absolutely. And it's about, there's over 80 million people in America that have prediabetes.
Right, because I keep hearing there is no such thing as pre-diabetes.
Oh, there is. Yeah, it's actually even a diagnosis code I bill every day on my chart.
Yeah. Okay. I just, it's so. I think there is one, but no, there's no such thing. So I just wondering. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question. Any last questions?
One thing I wanted to say about schools is there is a really good movie. If you go on, I don't know if you guys have heard of tubi.com, TUBI.com, but it's a place where you can watch a bunch of different free movies. They'll have like some ads, but there's a movie in there called The Kids Menu. And they go through an example of a place where they're really doing it right, really able to tackle the obesity, diabetes problem in childhood by basically teaching kids about how to garden and how to grow their food, and then how to take that food and how to cook with that food. And this is in the public schools. And they're teaching them simple techniques like yoga, and they're thinking outside the box. They're thinking about actual real health and making these kids. This school that the movie follows is from San Diego, and of course they have a beautiful place in San Diego where you can grow food so much of the year, and we don't all have that luxury of growing so much and having such wonderful weather. They do have a more active community and growing community, but still, this is the way to really combat diabetes and obesity at a young age, and really trying to combat this when someone's 40 or 50 years old is just not really the ideal way to do it. It's really about teaching kids what this is all about, and they love it. You think, okay, they're going to want their McDonald's, but if you start teaching how to grow foods and then eat those foods, they become so excited. They become the best champions for eating healthy, eating whole foods, and growing their plants, being sustainable, the environment. They said, kids are very interested in taking care of our world, much more than adults. Yeah, Jerry, what do you think? Yeah.
Eric, I think one of the most important things we heard tonight was that if teenagers don't get it together, they're going to have problems down the line 50 years from now.
Yeah.
And I've never heard that before, because he said, even if you quit, see, the damage is already done
Yeah.
in many instances. So I think if they started teaching it to children, literally, like Sesame Street, they'd be
Excellent.
healthier old people, and they'd have better lives, but they'd be healthier old folks.
Absolutely, Jerry.
They
Thank
don't
you
know.
so much for that. Yeah. Yeah.
They
So we
don't. They
know
don't
that.
know that.
I know. We know that heart disease starts, before age 10. And so we know we got to get there in elementary school. We got to teach these kids. They're going to have much more healthy, productive, happier lives without all the things that come with it. But yeah, and when I see kids, when I see a 1 or 2 year old who's obese in my clinic, that is not a big deal. I mean, I am one of the thinnest people I know, and it's my genetics. But when I was 1 or 2 years old, I was like the fattest baby ever, according to my mom. I don't remember this. Yeah. So it's not that that's associated with anything. I was a huge breast milk drinker, and I was a huge cow milk drinker, which is not great. But then what I see in my clinic is that, well, once they're 5, there's a pretty good chance, about a 50-50 chance, that they're going to have obesity as adults and run into all the problems that come along with it. And then if they're like 12, 13, it's 80% of those people who are 12 or 13 and are obese are going to be obese adults. That's amazing. And that's, if we're not hitting them by that point, it's really hard. They have a life of struggle, and I just don't want that struggle for them. I want to teach these kids young too. I feel the same way Jerry does. Yeah. So, yeah, well, thank you for listening to me ramble on, and I really enjoyed your questions and the discussion.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Scott and Lisa and the group, everybody in the group, we appreciate you coming.
Yep.
And there will be next week coming up. Any thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah, we're doing heart disease, the #1 killer next week.
Oh.
There's a tomorrow morning coming up if you want to join Dr. Ross in another talk. I think the link is on Facebook, but he's talking about food choices on our health and global health, I believe, right?
Yeah, how what we eat affects the world and also our personal health. I hope to keep it short and answer a lot of questions for whoever's interested. But we'll see how the session goes. Looking forward to it.
That sounds wonderful. One of my favorite subjects there.
Well, it's an important one, I mean, we can talk about an individual's health and keep them as healthy as we can be. And yet, if we allow global warming to continue on, and we don't have a planet to live on, all the health we promote and all the people, I'm thinking about how are we going to help the most number of people on our planet, and that's going to be, addressing issues which have been ignored for a long time. And it's easy. All of us can do something about it. We could do it tonight, tomorrow morning. We can make different choices about what we choose to eat, which is one of the biggest drivers of choosing animal products for our food is a biggest driver of global warming, more so than transportation. So we'll see how the rest of the world takes that message in. And there may be some people from Africa attending and people from around the world. Not a lot usually come to these sessions. Maybe I think 25 is the most that have shown up in the past. So we'll see how many show up tomorrow.
What time is that?
It's at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And there's a password associated with it. It's I think GO SC or something, but it's on the announcement. I believe the password is on the announcement.
On Facebook, but I think Lisa put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I realized there are some folks on here that are not on the Facebook group, so you could copy or save that, take a picture of it. 8 to 9 a.m. tomorrow.
That's kind of early.
Yeah.
Never bad time.
At work.
I'll have to set my alarm clock. I'm usually listening to something in bed about that time, waiting for my wife to get up.
Are you gonna record it?
Huh?
Are you gonna record it?
Well, they probably will at the school. I don't know. They may record it, but I won't have access. The school would, and that sort of thing.
Got it. All right.
Anyway, a lot of you have already heard it and most of the information, but
Oh, and Nancy had a question.
Yeah,
Oh,
Nancy.
no, I don't, Eric. I just want to confirm from your mom. She says, yes, he was huge. He couldn't fit in his baby clothes. Around the waist, had to leave open. So for anyone who didn't believe Eric, it's the truth from his mom right there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Was my mom here tonight? I didn't know if my mom was here.
No, no. I just quickly texted her.
Oh man.
That is a great way to end the meeting. Thank you all.
Nice.
Really fun. Until the next time.
All right.
Thanks again, Eric.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That was a great night tonight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, everybody.